Hey, listener name, I have to say, today's deep dive is a tough one. It's one of those cases that it's utterly heartbreaking. We're going to be looking at a case from Kanagar, India, where a seemingly ordinary family was ripped apart by a shocking crime.
Yeah, it's one of those cases that really reminds us that appearances can be deceiving.
Exactly. On the outside, you have the Sharma family. Pankaj, the father, worked in Kolkata. Shanta, the mother, had a job at a local restaurant. And they had their 8-year-old son, Shreyanshu. So totally normal, everyday family, right? And then everything changed in an instant.
It really is that sudden shift from ordinary life to unimaginable tragedy that makes these cases so disturbing.
Yeah, for sure. So the story begins with Shreyanshu's cousin making a horrifying discovery. Can you imagine walking into your relative's house and finding an 8-year-old boy brutally murdered? The scene was absolutely chaotic. Blood everywhere, signs of a struggle, a kitchen knife was just lying on the floor. And get this, the TV was blasting at full volume.
That's interesting. That detail about the TV almost seems like the killer was trying to mask any sounds of the crime, don't you think?
Yeah, it's a chilling thought for sure. Now, naturally, the police launched a full-blown investigation. But right from the start, things were puzzling. There was no sign of forced entry, nothing was stolen, and the family dog, who usually barked at strangers, hadn't made a peep.
Those details, while seemingly insignificant, are actually crucial clues. They point to the possibility that the killer was someone known to both the victim and the family dog.
Yeah, that's exactly what the police were thinking. They had to consider that Shreyanshu knew his attacker. So they started digging into the family's life, checking phone records, going through hours of CCTV footage from the neighborhood.
It's really like putting together a giant puzzle. Every piece of information, no matter how small, could be a potential lead. And in this case, one seemingly minor detail caught their attention.
Right. They spotted a woman wearing a mask, entering and leaving the Sharma's neighborhood around the time of the murder. Might have seemed like nothing, but it turned out to be a major break in the case.
It really shows how even the most ordinary details can become critical evidence in an investigation.
For sure. Now, Shanta Shreyanshu's mother claims she didn't recognize the woman. But get this, Pankaj, the father knew exactly who it was. It was Ishrat Parveen, a close family friend. In fact, she was so close to the family that Shreyanshu called her Masi, which means aunt. Now that changes things, doesn't it? It's not just a random stranger anymore. It's someone who was seemingly part of the family's inner circle.
Exactly. So naturally, the police started looking into Ishrat's phone records, and that's when they hit pay dirt. On the day of the murder, Ishrat's phone had been switched off for a solid 7 hours. And guess what? That time period perfectly matched the estimated time of Shreyanshu's death.
Ah, the digital footprint. Listener name, these days, almost everything we do leaves a trace. Our calls, our messages, our location, it's all there. And for investigators, it's a goldmine of information.
Yeah, it really is. And in this case, it got even more interesting. They found out that Ishrat and Shanta have been having tons of long late-night calls, sometimes talking for hours. I mean, come on, that's suspicious, right? Absolutely. It suggests a hidden relationship, something much deeper than just a casual friendship. And that's when the police really started digging, looking into their WhatsApp messages, hoping to find something more.
And boy, did they ever. The messages were filled with intimate conversations and even photos, revealing that Shanta and Ishrat were having an affair. And they'd kept it a secret from everyone, including Pankaj.
So this secret affair adds a whole new dimension to the case. It's a potential motive.
Right.
What would happen if Pankaj found out about their relationship? What lengths might someone go to in order to keep a secret like that hidden?
Those are some seriously big questions. And that's exactly what the police were trying to figure out. So they confronted Pankaj, and he admitted that he'd known about the affair for a while, but chose to keep quiet. He talked about societal pressure, about wanting to protect his son. It's a really complicated situation.
It really highlights the weight of societal expectations, doesn't it? Especially in a culture where tradition and family honor are so important.
Absolutely. Now, with the affair out in the open, the investigation focused squarely on Shante and Ishrat. The police brought them both in for questioning. And that's when things took a shocking turn. Shante confessed to killing her own son, with Ishrat's help.
Wow, that confession changes everything. But it also raises the biggest question of all. Why? What could possibly drive a mother to commit such a horrific act against her own child?
That is the million-dollar question. And that's what we'll pick up when we come back for part 2 of this deep dive. Stay tuned, listener name. This is about to get even more intense.
Welcome to the Horror Hour, and you are listening Shattered Innocence, A Mother's Betrayal. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Okay, listener name, we're back. And man, this case just keeps getting more complex. We're trying to understand why a mother would take the life of her own child. And the truth is, it's a tangled web of fear, desperation, and societal pressures.
Yeah, you're right. The confession was just the beginning. Now, investigators had to unravel the why behind this horrific act, and often these kinds of cases are driven by a really complex mix of emotions.
It's hard to even wrap your head around it.
Right.
A mother killing her own child. It's almost too much to process. But as we delve deeper into Shanta's confession, things start to become a bit clearer, though no less disturbing.
Yeah. Here's where the story takes an even darker turn. Shanta revealed that Shreyanshu, her 8-year-old son, had accidentally walked in on her and Ishrat in a compromising situation. Imagine the confusion and fear a child would feel witnessing something like that.
Oh, it's heartbreaking to even think about what little Shreyanshu must have gone through. I mean, he couldn't possibly understand what he'd seen. And understandably, he started acting differently. He became withdrawn, quiet, even started acting out a bit. Yeah. You know, it's a classic sign of a child struggling with something that they can't express.
Yeah, and sadly, instead of recognizing her son's distress as a cry for help, Shanta was consumed by fear. She panicked, worried that Shreyanshu would reveal her secret. She was terrified of the consequences, the shame, the judgment from her community.
It's a stark reminder of how powerful societal pressures can be, especially in cultures where traditions and family honor are paramount. Shanta felt trapped, like her entire world would come crashing down if anyone found out about the affair.
It's a classic fear-driven response. Instead of facing the situation head-on, she convinced herself that the only way to protect her secret was to silence her son permanently. A truly horrific decision fueled by panic and desperation.
And the way she carried it out, as she described it, is just chilling. In a moment of pure panic, she smashed Shreyanshu's head against a wall, then a table. And when that didn't silence him, she grabbed a knife from the kitchen and slit his throat.
God, it's a level of brutality that's almost impossible to comprehend, especially coming from a parent. It speaks to the absolute desperation and distorted thinking that had gripped Shanta at that moment.
It's a horrifying reminder that even in the darkest corners of the human psyche, there's often a story, a chain of events that leads to such unimaginable acts. But even with her confession and a motive revealed, there are still some puzzling aspects to this case.
Right. One detail that stands out is that Ishrat was caught on CCTV footage entering and leaving the Sharma's house. But Shanta wasn't. She deliberately took a different route home, avoiding any cameras. This suggests a level of premeditation, a deliberate attempt to cover her tracks.
Yeah, it adds a layer of chilling calculation to an already horrific crime, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It shows that while she might have acted impulsively in the moment of the murder, there was also a conscious effort to avoid getting caught. And it really highlights how crucial technology like CCTV has become in criminal investigations.
Absolutely. And let's not forget another piece of the puzzle, the dog's silence. That seemingly small detail was a huge confirmation for investigators. It reinforced their theory that the killer had to be someone familiar to Shreyanshu, someone he wouldn't perceive as a threat. It's amazing how sometimes the smallest details can hold the biggest clues.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. So, listener name, here we are. With this incredibly disturbing case laid out before us, we've uncovered a secret affair, a desperate attempt to conceal the truth, and ultimately the unthinkable act of a mother killing her own child. It raises so many questions about human nature, the choices we make, and the devastating consequences that can follow.
It's a case that's so much more than just a crime. It forces us to think about the immense pressure society can place on individuals, the complexities of relationships, the burden of secrets, and the dark path that fear and desperation can lead us down.
Exactly. We've explored the crime, the investigation, and the motive, but there's still so much to unpack. When we come back for the final part of this deep dive, we'll examine the impact of this tragedy on the community, the trial, the verdict, and the broader questions it raises about justice and accountability in a case as complex as this.
And you are listening Shattered Innocence, A Mother's Betrayal. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
We're back. Listener name. And I know this case has been heavy, to say the least. The brutality of the crime, the betrayal, a mother taking her own son's life, it's hard to even process.
It really does. It shakes you to the core. And it's not just those directly involved who feel the impact. A crime like this, it sends ripples through the entire community, leaving everyone feeling vulnerable and questioning everything they thought they knew.
Absolutely. I mean, after Shreyanshu's murder, the town of Konakar was in complete shock. You know how it is in those small communities? Everyone knows everyone. So imagine that sense of familiarity being shattered by such a horrific event. Neighbors who once felt safe now looked at each other with suspicion and fear.
Yeah, it's like the very foundation of trust gets eroded.
Right.
Violent crime, especially within a close-knit community, it creates this climate of fear and uncertainty, makes people withdraw, become hesitant to connect, because who knows what secrets might be lurking beneath the surface.
Exactly. And this case in particular has sparked a massive debate in India about societal pressure, hidden relationships, and the lengths people will go to protect their secrets. Many people question whether those deeply ingrained societal norms played a role in pushing Shanta to such an extreme act.
It's a conversation that I think needed to happen. This case forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about the pressures we place on people, especially women, to conform to certain expectations. The fear of shame, of being ostracized by your community, it can be incredibly powerful. And tragically, in this case, it seems to have contributed to a devastating outcome.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack, that's for sure. But in the midst of all the grief and outrage, there was also this collective cry for justice. The people of Kanagar and really people across India wanted to see Shanta and Ishrat held accountable for their actions.
Yeah, that's a natural human response, isn't it?
Yeah.
When something this horrific happens, there's this deep-seated need to see justice served. It's a way for society to reaffirm its values, to say that, we will not tolerate these acts, there will be consequences.
And the trial that followed was huge news, with every detail splashed across the media. In the end, both Shanta and Ishrat were found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison.
I'm sure the verdict brought a sense of closure to many, but it's important to remember that the legal system can only go so far. While it can punish the perpetrators, it can't undo the pain and suffering caused. It can't bring back a young life that was so tragically cut short.
That's the hardest part, isn't it? That sense of loss. The sheer injustice of it all. Shreyanshu's story is a chilling reminder of the dark side of human nature, of the potential for cruelty and violence that exists even within the bonds of family.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that darkness can lurk beneath the surface of what appears to be normalcy. But it's also a reminder of the importance of community, of support, of creating a society where people feel safe to reach out for help, to confide their fears and struggles, and to find a way out of the darkness before it consumes them.
This deep dive has been a tough one. Listener name. It's forced us to confront some really uncomfortable truths about humanity. But I hope it's also been thought-provoking. Cases like this, they challenge us to examine our own beliefs, to consider the consequences of our actions, and to ask ourselves what we can do to prevent such tragedies from happening in the future.
It's a question worth pondering. What can we do as individuals and as a society to create a world where children are safe, where secrets don't lead to violence, and where fear doesn't drive people to commit unimaginable acts? That's something I hope you continue to think about long after this deep dive is over.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Until next time, listener names, stay safe and keep those critical thinking caps on fine.